welcome to another episode of Audit.Refrain. This week, we've got a really special episode. We've got Seth, AKA Com Truise, joining us. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Also, Kyle couldn't make it in for this episode, so I thought a perfect guest co-host would be Ben, AKA Hotel Pools. Ben, welcome on.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'm really excited. We're going to talk about Galactic Melt track by track and get your insight into this record. For me, just a background, Seth. It was the first thing that I listened to that got me into the more retro facing music. It's the first thing that really hooked me. I'd heard some other stuff, but this was the album that made me go, "Oh, I get it. I love this." So it's an important album for me because it's kind of changed my direction of a lot of things that I've done, and I know it's really important to a lot of other people, including Ben as well.
Yeah, I mean, this record it means a lot. I mean, for me, the artwork in itself, when I saw it, just kind of struck me, and it was something that I've always kind of held up there as one of my favorite cover pieces. But beyond that, it's just, I don't know, these songs, like I always come back to this record. It's a record I'm always, if I'm on a drive or I'm doing something random, that's the record I always seem to come back to. So, yeah, it's just it's a special album for me.
Awesome.
So, Seth, could you set up how this came together? I think this is the second official Com Truise record, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, Cyanide Sisters was before that, but it really was an EP that I put out on a net label, and then called AM Discs, and then Ghostly, when I started talking to them, they wanted to re-release it with bonus tracks and some samples removed and things like that. So I guess it kind of became a record, but to me it's always going to be an EP. So I mean, the Galactic Melt is the first Com Truise record, and to me at least, really.
Right. And you've talked about that Com Truise is sort of a through line story, a character, and the records are a journey through that story, right?
Yeah, I think I really came up with that kind of concept. I think to really just facilitate me staying on track and kind of, giving me a little more to be inspired about, because generally I tried to avoid writing about immediate things in my personal life as or at least use them as direct inspiration for songs. I think I'm more of a dreamer, so I kind of went down that path with kind of creating the story narrative, just to kind of, it was really for personal reasons, and then talking with my manager, we decided to kind of make it known, that there was a story behind it, that, just kind of loosely came up with the story and we kind of ran with it. And then I just kind of built upon that for, the subsequent releases and things like that.
So what's interesting is that I had read an article, I think it's about 4 years ago, and this is around when Persuasion System came out, and you were talking about how that album was starting to be the end of the Com Truise story. Obviously you've released the another record and then In Decay 2. Is that still the case where you thinking about retiring the Com Truise thing, or have you just evolved and that's what you're going to do music as?
I guess it's more now, it's not really retired, but I would think about it as like a broader ecosystem is where these kind of newer records live. In Decay 2 and In Decay, those were always kind of outside this story, this original narrative, just because they were left, like In Decay was leftover tracks from Galactic Melt. A lot of the music on In Decay I actually wrote before I wrote Galactic Melt stuff, so it's really weird to me like to try to fit them in with the storyline, because it was all random stuff. It was leftover tracks and stuff before, and same thing with In Decay 2. A lot of that music is actually from when I was writing Galactic Melt still, and then some new stuff, and then the stuff along the way. So those two records they're just compilations. They don't fit the story or have a story really. They're just a way for me to close the vaults and stop having to go in and look for old files and missing sounds and all kinds of crap, so it's a way for me to just get rid of tracks that if they don't, if they didn't come out on those compilations, they would just probably, die on a hard drive somewhere.
Gotcha. And I'm sure that, everyone appreciates that. I certainly like hearing those other maybe flavors or tones that don't fit thematically into a Com Truise record, that you get to have other sides to your creative process.
Yeah, I tend to I really try to write the record at the same time for the most part. Sometimes it's difficult with life and getting in the way and things like that. But yeah, to me, as cohesive as those two records might feel, to me, it's like a time warp through all kinds of periods, so,
So in a way,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, in a way, it almost is really personal, just not directly, because you listen to them and they take you back to very specific times in your life.
Definitely.
Is that how most of your records are written? Kind of like, have any of them been written where you've sat down and been like, I'm gonna write all these songs and put it into an album? Are they mostly written that way, kind of, in pieces and taken from different periods?
No, I'd say maybe before. So when I first began this project, I would, I was still working a full-time job, so I had a really limited time, and I think that kind of forced me to be much faster at writing, because I have slowed way down with stuff out and with the label and stuff like that. So everything just takes so much time now. But yeah, I'd say since the career started, and then once I left my job and started touring, I think that's when I that's when I started to write a little disjointed, where I was out on the road, and I don't know if that came through, but I was out on the road, and kind of distracted, so I would write some stuff while I was home, and then I would go for a month, and then I would come home and then be like, what was I thinking here? Where was it?
Yeah.
So then I would just cherry pick what I really thought was good from a bunch of different piles, and try to be like, I guess this is what the record kind of what I wanted it to sound like at one point. But I think now I'm a little more stationary. I've kind of settled quite a bit. I'm trying to write the music, as big chunks. Like now I'm just kind of going in my own mind as, an album is just one idea, or an EP is one idea. It's not all based on like the Com Truise story. So I think it's a little easier for me to wrap my head around, and instead of like trying to, piece this weird story together. But yeah, I'm just really focused on writing, all at the same time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right on. I mean, it's an interesting. You've grown obviously as an artist and musician, where your writing styles have changed, and you've changed because you're a human being, so you grow and evolve, and the music is reflecting that journey, which is really cool. I always like to see personal growth through people's art and how they grow and evolve. With that, obviously things are really different for you now. Having had a full-time job, or a job that you were working and making music, to having music and touring as your full-time gig. In contrast, or in looking back, how does Galactic Melt feel to you? Is there anything that stands out as unique or special or different?
It brings me back to that time when I was living in New Jersey in an apartment by myself, and all my friends there were older, and I was alone a lot of the time. And I would remember coming home from work, from worked in advertising. I would come home from the office, probably 6, 7 o'clock, and then stay up till 3, 4 in the morning, just writing tunes on these crappy little monitors. And kind of when I first started to acquire what little synths I could afford, at least of the vintage stuff, because I don't think it was all the rage yet. It was kind of still, they were kind of still coming back, and now it's just the prices for that stuff are outrageous.
Right.
And, I just remember I could get stuff I could drive to old ladies' houses and buy it out of their garage. You know, like it wasn't
Right.
so.
Yeah.
It's crazy now, but yeah, it definitely, like I said, thinking, you know, before I said that, you know, I definitely don't focus on my personal life directly in the music, but now listening to it, like I was just, you know, kind of breezing through it before we started recording, and I was like, wow, this sounds like New Jersey to me, you know, it's just kind of things.
That's awesome. I'm actually, where are you from New Jersey? Because I actually grew up in New Jersey as well a bit.
I'm from upstate New York, a town called Oneida near Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
And I moved to Jersey to work in advertising, and I worked in Princeton. I lived in Ewing for a little while, in Trenton.
Oh wow, man! Every summer I used to go to the Princeton public pool with my cousins. We go to Hoagie Haven, the best hoagie shop in Princeton, and that's awesome. You know what? Maybe that's part of why I have such a connection, because there are certain albums that make me like have that nostalgic feeling. That's not just the word, but actually a true connection to it. And I think maybe that's part of it. I don't know, subconsciously. That's funny.
It's like what they say about New York bagels. Like they're just good because of water. And I do think that I've always felt like, you know, what if I went back to New Jersey for a year just to write a record, just like, you know, living in nothing crazy, just a little apartment somewhere, just set everything up and record. Like if I could mimic that. But I really think a lot of that was like, because I was working a full-time job, I think my creativity was like squelched all day on other things. And then when I would get home, the music would just write itself. Like I really didn't have to try then. Like now I feel like I have to try a little harder. Now I'm, you know, I think it's also because I had so little as far as equipment, and now I have so much. And I think a lot of that gets in the way. Constantly moving stuff to my storage unit because I'm like, this is just taking up space. I don't use it. It just like, and then I end up feeling bad about not using it. So I get it out of the room, and I'm like,
but not the Moog One though, right? No. The Moog One.
that's my new space.
Right on. Is there, I mean, anything else that you can think of that is, you know, stands out to you about that era for you and in the songwriting process? You said that it just kind of wrote itself. Was there, like, at the time of writing it, you'd started a theme maybe for a character or storyline, and did that come through in the way, looking back on it now, that you anticipated, or did it just become what it was?
I think, you know, I'm heavily into science fiction, films, books, you know, comics, all of it, you know. And I think I kind of took a page from, you know, the films, really, the department, I suppose, as a way of, I love film scores, and, you know, not just science fiction, I like everything, but I kind of wanted to make it was like a score for a film that was in my head. I just kind of had this, you know, loose story. And, you know, I think what really stands out to me now, thinking about it a little bit deeper, is I think this is when I, you know, that time period in New Jersey, and this, you know, before this record, and, you know, around Cyanide Sisters, they're very close. I was working on them at the same time, basically, honestly. So that's kind of when I fell in love with 80s, you know, music and stuff. And then once the, you know, the shininess wore off of that, I was like, okay, so what do I really like about 80s music? I was like, it's the equipment. It's not so much the music. I do love the music, you know, great tunes, but it was like the production techniques and recording quality, and just the vintage samplers and things like that is when I think that period had forced me into like really starting to research. But, you know, at the same time, I was still very naive in producing music. And I think that's where a lot of the charm came from, and all kinds of happy accidents and stuff I just didn't really know or think about or care about. And I think now you care about too much, and it kind of gets in the way. So I definitely think this was like Galactic Melt was definitely came very easy. Definitely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, you know, being like early, all these happy accidents, because you just don't know. It's ignorance is bliss, sort of. You're not trapped by any either trapped by your own self or trapped by musical conventions because you're just figuring it out. And I was curious the contrast between now and then, and it sounds like what you're saying is that it gets a little bit harder to write music because you've got a lot of equipment, you got a lot of history doing it.
Yeah, you feel pressured from fans and labels, and before when I had this, it was like, I was on the net label still, and they were just like, yeah, whatever you got, send it over. You know what I mean? So it was like that was the end of it, and there wasn't any pressure really. I was doing it for fun in my bedrooms.
Right.
Like it's very different now.
As the project progresses and people expect certain things out of you, right, and then you start to, then that affects your writing in a way. It's
waning. Yeah, definitely. It really kind of it can zap the fun if you think about it too much. And I think I took most of 2020 off. I didn't do anything. I was like playing games with my girlfriend and daughter, and like just cooking a lot, watching movies, reading. I really didn't. I did a couple remixes, and that's really it. Just very, very few projects, and I feel recharged. I rewired the studio like a week ago, and it's all organized now. So I finally feel ready to write.
Nice.
Yeah, that's
exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy because it's not the case with the various musicians that I talk to that they have that effect. You basically get a year and a half forced off, and it sounds like you've recalibrated to the things that are really important to you. And it was a struggle. I just didn't really feel all that creative, and it's funny because I always thought that touring made me less creative, and just traveling, in general, I always felt like it took away, like it took part of me away, and I would feel pretty empty coming home, and definitely not want to write. But actually, I think it's just, I don't know, I've always kind of, I think I just had so little going on that there was nothing to drive me. It was like, It's in a weird way. I think when I worked in advertising, that really pushed me. I wasn't trying to escape advertising. I loved my job, and wasn't trying to go on tour, and wasn't trying to get, I just wanted a vinyl record. I wanted my music on a vinyl record, and I would have been happy. Here we are 10 years, 12 years later, whatever. And it's like, what did I do? Yeah, it is. It is crazy. And it's interesting that when you have sort of like how real life influences your creativity, either as an outlet, because you have all these ideas that you're restricted in a workplace, and then you finally get to release them when you get home, and you kind of take that away. And your main thing is that it's interesting how that impacts someone's creativity. All right, guys. Are we ready to get into listening to the first track and talk about it?
Sure.
All right, so we're gonna play Terminal here, and we'll come back and talk about it. back now. So obviously this is the intro to the track and the tone setter for the album. Seth, what can you tell us about Terminal?
That was the last track of the record I wrote, which is funny. I definitely don't, kind of. There's no order when I'm writing. I think, I just went back to, okay, so if this is going to be a story, or if this is some, film in my head, there has to be, title credits and, logo animations and, kind of, that was really what this track was about. It was just really to kick it off. And then, I kind of, after the record was, what I thought it was done, I, wrote the Terminal and it was just slapped it in the front.
Right on. So
I'm kind of interested in asking you about the vocal, like the voices. Were those, I'm sure you've like talked about it, but were the voices there something you recorded, or were those samples and then you kind of tossed them through some effects? How are you doing that?
I don't know if I can get in trouble for.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
Secret, got it.
They are the built-in voice, the dictation on the. I think at the time I was using an iMac. It's just the dictation on iMac. I would and then record it with hijack, and then it just frequency shift it and make it sound kind of. I wanted it to sound like the voices, the FM radio voices in THX 1138. I wanted it to sound like those wobbly old radios, and that's kind of what I was going for.
Got it.
Yeah, it sounds cool. It's like to me, it's like RoboCop. It's like a video they'd play like in the lobby in like RoboCop, like at the station or something.
Yeah.
Like it reminds me. It does take it kind of puts a visual in my head immediately. So it's successful there.
Right on. And so, like, it title credits the opening to the film, to the story, if you will. And did you think really hard about you write the tracks as they come? Like, how much time did you spend on arranging the track order, or did it just feel right?
I think I guess because this was my first real record, in my mind at least. My manager at the time, he really, really helped me with that, because I was like, I know I wanted to tell this story, but as far as I kind of just write, and then sometimes I'm like, I'll just write, and then it'll make me feel something as I'm writing, not like I'm sad and then I write a sad song. You know what I mean? Like, right. I'm like, oh, this song is a little depressing. I'm not really ever focused on going into it with like, the mood. I guess I just write what I think sounds good, and then later when the song is finished or halfway through or whenever, I'm like, okay, so this is more part of this part of the story, or this is about this part of the story. So yeah, I don't know, this is the track listing was it was something very new to me to try to kind of put it in an order, and I never really thought about it. I guess I would just listen to records growing up and never really, I've always been that whole album listener all the way through, front to back, you know what I mean? And then,
Same, yeah.
You go through it and pick what you like, really. But I don't think it ever really rubbed off on me how important that was. Like, I just kind of listened to music and I was like, all of this is great, and like, so, trying to put it together to tell a story, especially without words, it was tricky for me to wrap my head around for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a first outing in your, official for you in your mind, it's iconic, really. I think, this, I think there's a few other artists sort of doing similar thematic in their brains what you're doing, but you're the first person to really, I think, focus in on write the story in your brain, make a thematic music. And now it's huge. I mean, that's a huge way that people now write music, especially electronic music, is as a movie in their head.
Yeah, it's all the rage now.
So
it was just, and it's crazy because thinking about that and seeing it everywhere now, I was just like, I did it by just so I would stay on track, so I wasn't I don't know. It was a way to just keep it all together for me. It's like it was just an organizational tool. That's all it was. Organizational tool.
And that's super interesting.
It's smart though.
Yeah, it's really smart. Pragmatic, I think, in a way to get the thing done. Because to me, like, I've always thought, well, the reason why people do that is, a whole generation of people of a certain age group watch all these movies and have all these influences, and you can't, there's such iconic film score music, any John Carpenter movie you watch, the score is super important to that, or if it's a Vangelis thing or whatever it is. And I just wondered if there was a subconscious influence on everybody to go, well, these sounds with visuals and they work together to evoke a very specific experience. What if we just do that with music alone?
Yeah. Interesting.
All right. So are we ready to talk about or go into the next track, VHS Sex? Awesome.
VHS Sex.
This.
damn.
Yeah, this song. When you hear, and this is a little. Sorry, this is a funny aside. Seth, do you ever, when you write music, do you ever go, "This is good"?
Not until much later. When I listen to this record now, I'm like, I don't even know how I did it, to be completely honest with you. Like how I came up with that. Like, I try to write a beat like that now, and I'm like, wow, man, that's too simple. Like, and it's just fun. It's really funny to hear after all this time. I'm like,
yeah. I gotta just say, I love the mix you got on this record. Like, it's so crispy and bright, but it doesn't hurt your ears at all. You know what I mean? Like you really treaded that line, but like it's so nice still. It's pleasant. You know what I mean? I'm not sure how you did that, but it's something I always like. I'll A/B with a song on here and be like, how did he get that high end like that? You know what I mean?
Reason.
Was it That's crazy, man. I always tell people to use Reason. Reason's so great. I'm glad. So are you a Reason user still?
I use it sometimes now. I've graduated to using Ableton a lot.
Okay.
But I don't know how I did this record in this time that way, because I think back then even for like this song, just listening to the, when the bass comes in and the little, stabby pad sound. Like I used to record like any synths I had and lots of virtual instruments in Ableton, and then put them all in samplers inside of Reason, and then you would have to play from the beginning of this, even if it was like a looped part, it would just like, so you'd have to start from the beginning the whole time, which was so stupid. You couldn't put virtual instruments or audio on.
Oh, that's right.
On the sequencer, at that time, and Reason wasn't capable. It was not a capability yet. And then I remember I used to just record lots of just like one hits of like string sounds, and like I had the Matrix 6, and I would record string sounds and bass sounds, and then I would just throw that one sample in the sampler and play stuff like that. Like, it's crazy how simple it was, and like how, to me, it's like I can't reproduce it now, because I'm like, well, all I did was that, but I do it now, and I'm like, it just doesn't feel the same. It was
captured a certain, but that's kind of like old school hip hop style production too, when you had like no sample time and you had to just chop a note and try to make it work. You know what I mean? Like that stuff, that it almost makes you, it forces you to be creative in a different way. You know what I mean?
I like the limitation.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's cool.
Because it's impressive. You were using a really rudimentary program, because when I made music, I used Reason. That was because I'm used to actual hardware, and I loved Reason because it was a virtual rack, and especially that time, it was really difficult to work with. It was very restricted in its abilities, and the fact that like you're telling me that you made this in Reason, I'm just gobsmacked, because it takes so much.
Cool.
Reason will always hold a place in my heart. I definitely. Going back in there, and now it's like going back into Reason now, like I don't think I could achieve this same thing with the Reason that there is now. I'd have to go back to the original version.
To Reason 5.
Right now there's virtual instruments in there and all the rack extensions and whatnot.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, that's I think a level of like dedication to like, I'm going to make this song, and no matter how difficult it is, like practically to do it, you still did it, and then you ended up with this iconic song at the end of it. It's just really impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy.
This is the song, I got to tell you, I was just in Santa Barbara recently because I live in Portland, Oregon, but we hadn't been anywhere in a while because of the pandemic stuff, and we drove down there, and I had to go drive with my wife and kid, and they were at the Airbnb, and I went on a little drive. Rolled the windows down, blast VHS Sex, and just watch everyone turn, as I'm blasting it. That was a highlight. I don't know. This song just hits, man. There's something about this track. So yeah,
it's crazy. I'd say the majority, actually all of this record and a lot of the stuff from Side Night Sisters and a lot of Indie stuff and some of the stuff on Indie 2, was through Reason. And really what I did was I had this wacky effects set up on the main output, like after the mixer, after after your main output, and then that's really, I don't know. I remember when we were going to have it mastered way back in 2011. So the guy who mastered it, Assault Mastering, I forget his actual name at the moment, but he was like, "Wow, this is pretty crazy. I don't really have to do much." and he sent back, Futureworld. He's like, "I really didn't have to do anything. I don't know how you did this, but it's like almost perfect." I was like, "Wow," I was like, "How did I?" was like, "How did I do it?" Like, so I've definitely done that too. I've like referenced this record before, and it's one of those miracles, that I'm just like, I don't want to replicate it, but I do miss it, sometimes.
Yeah.
I think the reason I wrote used Reason to sequence the record and the tracks was because I was pretty afraid of going into Ableton at that time. I'd used Cubase for years and Logic, and I was just like, I'm not ready to do it in there yet. I was so just so familiar with Reason, and it'll always mean something to me, definitely.
Well, shout out to Reason, because back then it was still Propellerhead Reason,
right?
I know they changed, but all three of us are Reason users. So
yeah,
shout out Reason.
Yeah, what a great endorsement.
Yeah,
and
I did a instrument tutorial for them recently and made a little demo track. And I'm still in contact with the guys, and they hooked me up with the new stuff, and but it's the capabilities now are crazy. It's pretty amazing. So.
Yeah. I still use it all the time. I mean, Reason for me is what I use when I need to, like you said, happy accidents happen a lot in Reason. And whenever I need to like quickly get an idea going, I'll sometimes get out of the studio and just go into Reason and try to make myself use Reason. And it works usually.
It's a good thing to travel. It's a good system to use when traveling too, because you're right. It really is. It's always been easy to jot down ideas or get something out really quick, and then you can just polish it up later. But
exactly,
I definitely like it when I'm not home. If I go to visit my parents or just wherever. Like the Reason's always it's never left the computer. I've always had it on there.
Right.
Nice.
So with the title of the song and the samples in it, like obviously it was always going to elicit a certain reaction when you listen to it, right? So talk about like kind of your thoughts about the song and where it came from and whatnot.
In a way, I think it's kind of to me, it's definitely it's porno, basically. It's pornography. When I think about why I wrote it now, I think childhood memories of watching the squiggly channels late at night and things like that come to mind. And but I guess in the context of the record, it kind of goes along the line of you're kind of just forced to see sex everywhere, even in a future society where we have androids and they can go to space and laser guns and things. It's still sex. It's everywhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's on every screen. It's everywhere. It's in your face. Like you can't escape it. It's like kind of annoying. You know what I mean? And I think that's what really that was about. But the first those two, then the VHS Sex and the next track are it was like I couldn't sum it up my views with just one song. I had to do two right in a row to view on those. So
one of the things that like with the title and kind of the vibe is it reminds me of Videodrome. You guys see that movie?
Yep. Oh yeah.
And so like because literally they insert a VHS cassette into James Woods to program him, and I kind of had those vibes. And as you talk about it, I think that's really interesting because I think is that you can't escape it. Even like in Blade Runner, that a far off movie into the future, they've got pleasure models of androids and it's always being blasted at you, programming essentially to be oversexed. And so I think it's really interesting that you capture that overstimulation and programming in that song.
Yeah, Videodrome, Blade Runner, and a few others, THX 1138, and we're definitely heavily on rotation in when I would be done writing, that's all I would watch was those 3 movies. I always say, that I watched Blade Runner like I don't know 500 times or something stupid. Like I just would watch it every night, and I would just. So yeah, it's definitely. I mean, the song and the next are definitely. Videodrome was a huge inspiration.
You ever get to the point, especially like for me personally with Blade Runner, I can't watch it anymore. I've seen it so many times and know it so well that I can't watch it anymore. I've got a couple of movies like that, especially from when I was a kid and a teenager. Always love them. If they're on in the background, that's fine. But I can't sit and watch the original Blade Runner anymore.
Yeah, I got to that point, and that was sorry. I got to that point, and that was like a while back. I started to feel that way, and then I kind of started to reintroduce the movie, and now I can watch it here and there. But more so, I'll put it on and just roll over and lay there and not even watch it. Like I just like the sound. I can hear the dialogue and the music. I know exactly what's on the screen. You know what I mean? So it's more of a. It's like it's like a comfort thing, I think.
See, I do that except with planes, trains, and automobiles. Just 24-hour loop as I sleep.
Yep.
That's awesome.
I think. Go ahead.
No. You go ahead.
I think that I've reached that limit again where I try to watch it and I'm like, man, I've just seen it so many times. It's like I think I watched it so many times because I always thought I was seeing or hearing or feeling something new, and I finally feel like, all right, well, I think I squeezed every drop out of that. But I mean, it's still the cinematography is it's beautiful. Yeah, music is incredible. It's just like it really inspired me to do the rest of this music. Like that was the movie. Like I remember walking past in the movie store that right on there, Route 1, right by my old apartment. And I must have walked past it like 100 times. I would go there every Friday and buy a bunch of new DVDs and have movies for the weekend, and just stay home and write music and make pizza, the whole deal. And then
sounds like a great time.
I finally was like, Blade Runner, Harrison Ford, whatever. All right, I'll give it a try. And I took it home. I was like, man, I'm an idiot. Why did it take me this long to give this? It's like one of the greatest films I've ever seen. Then I went and bought the special edition box with all the toys. Like it's crazy to me that I judged a book by its cover, and then I finally gave in to the weird pressure of walking past it, so many times, wondering what it was, and I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. Blown away.
Absolutely. So let's get into the next song, Cathode Girls. Again, they're sister pieces, and you play these two together in live sets. I've noticed that you have pairings of songs in your live sets.
Definitely.
All right, let's get into this. All right. Again, Ben hit on this earlier with the album is how clean it is. The highs are really crisp and the lows are really low, but it's not muddled at all. It's really, really impressive, especially in this song.
Yeah, again, it goes back to that using reason. I don't know how I really achieved it. I think I had that little saying there for a while, mid-fi, slow motion, funk kind of thing. I was really going for that mid-fi because right before this project, I was really into kind of like sampley future hip hop beats, kind of, and then I did a little electro stuff, and then even before that, I was really into ambient because I'm a huge Boards Canada fan. So I went for really lo-fi, like wobbly, broken, not no fidelity whatsoever. And this project was me wanting to kind of have that quality where you can listen to it in your car and it sounds amazing, but it's not like super clean, and super organized. I think a lot of the music that I like, it sounds terrible in the car. Like you can't really play it loud. It doesn't have that vibe. It's like it's easy listening at home music, or in headphones, and I wanted that step outside the headphones. And I think a lot of the stuff that I wrote before that was kind of more headphone music, I would think. And I was just trying to break out of that mold for me. And this is, Cathode Girls is definitely one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, I love
this song. To me, is like a good example. For me, like in your music, sometimes it can be very like unsettling. Like how it starts, you're like, what is happening? You know what I mean? And then it becomes so aligned that you really don't notice. And that's kind of special because that's hard to do. So that's kind of something like I remember talking to you after a gig once, and we spoke about that, how you have to be in a certain mindset and how the music you make isn't always chill. There's some, there's some kind of like aggressiveness to it too, and I think this song is it's a good example of that, which kind of is one of the things I like about your music. It's just so like one side to the other. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Definitely. I think a lot of that was, I think Cyanide Sisters was very chill wave sounding to me, where I don't think a lot of it was that abrasive. And I think I didn't really want to be put in that bucket. Like I like chill wave, but I just didn't think I was ever chill wave. I mean, I was like more into sci-fi and like aliens and things like that. And I wanted it to be a little darker and a little weird, and I wasn't trying to make like, music for the beach. I was trying to make like galactic, if there was a UFO cruising by with like alien gangsters in it, this is like the stuff that'd be bumping. Like that's kind of what I just wanted. But I don't know. It's definitely just super sci-fi Q. To me, I think that's really what drove it, because I think like how you were saying that the songs kind of sound completely, so they can sound so wacky, and then all of a sudden it's just like whoosh, you're like the center. And I think a lot of I see that in films a lot, where they do that, where it's just and then all of a sudden you're back to normal. Like how did you achieve that? You can do it like it's like sleight of hand if you're just there.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, there's also seems to be like a very aligned synth sound on the like were there certain pieces you were using a lot on this album that you decided were kind of going to create the sound, or were you
a sequential circuit split 8 a lot on this record, and the battery is still dead, It was dead then. So everything that I recorded was like one off, like I recorded it, could never save the patch. And like, I just wasn't, now I've been thinking, I just got a Sequential Circuits Tom, the drum machine came in the mail yesterday.
Oh, nice.
So going to get the split 8 out of the storage unit and finally fixing the battery. I'm a little more competent as far as, repairing synths now. So I actually like doing it. But I think that was huge. And the Matrix 6, the Oberheim Matrix 6 was huge during that period for me.
Okay.
And then, I had I think I had an Oberheim DX, not the DMX, the DX at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have, I'm trying to think of what else I had. I had a really crappy old Akai reel-to-reel tape machine that I used that I ended up throwing away because it had a terrible hum, and it weighed like, I don't know, it was like 100 pounds. And it wasn't even that big. It was crazy how heavy it was.
What were you like bouncing your stereo mix out to it, or what were you like using?
I would record tracks or parts, or just the say the lead. I would record the lead to it, and then re-record the lead back in the computer with the the general that you
nice.
But I really had a small amount of equipment. I had a Prophet 2000, which is the like weird sampler keyboard, but it was that thing was so hard to use. And I recently picked up the Akai X7000 sampler, which is basically the same thing. So I've been trying to I got to repair it a little bit, but I missed having that old school sample quality because I've been using the MPC Live 2 a lot for beats lately. Just I don't know, it's nice to I used to really draw a lot of stuff in, and then I kind of like jamming these days a little bit now. I think I run into more happy accidents,
Mm-hmm. Like sequencing out of the box and doing that stuff, and nice.
It's like, I you know what it is, and I think that's why I'm so slow at producing now, is that I'm just bored of sitting in front of the computer. I used to I was on it 24/7 at work, at home, and now I'm just like, I'd rather do something else. So using stuff like that is helps me get off of it.
Nice.
A lot more tactile, you're engaged in the activity, it seems like, more now.
Definitely.
One of the things I want to touch on here, and because it's very clear by these two songs now, you understand the quality of the drums that are happening, and just the complexity of the programming, and how did you create these drum beats? They're hard for people that don't know. Programming drums can be really, really difficult to do. And I've just always been impressed by your drum programming. You can clearly hear on this record how big of a fan I am of the vintage drum machines of a certain period. Not a big fan of like 808. Everybody's gonna hate me for saying that, but it's like I'm not a big fan of the 808, and I'm not a big fan of the 909 and things like that. But it's more like the drum tracks, and the DX, DMX, and Lindrum, and those machines. I think, I don't know. I think the other machines to me don't sound like drums as I think them. As I think of them, they sound more synthetic, which I like. I don't mind them. I don't think they work as well in my music, and I feel like every time I've tried to use them, it's kind of it's a little forced in there. But you're right. Programming, especially on those old machines, I remember that DX was like, it was crazy. It sounded amazing, but the timing was insane, and it was difficult to program on. It was to get what I wanted out of it. So I was like, well, I'm going to go for that sound, but like reprogram these drums, in a much more, a much more kind of futuristic way, is I would like to put it, I guess. And I've always really focused on the drums because my first foray into music was drum and bass music. I used to DJ drum and bass music down in Philly and produce it a little bit. And so I've always just been a drum junkie, and I like old samples and that kind of stuff. So
I've really always tried to make the drums as nice as I possibly could, and really, that's a big part of the track for me. I think a lot of times I start with the drums just because that's just my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. I think
That's awesome.
Yeah, it sets your music apart from other electronic music because it adds a vibrancy or like a liveliness to it. And then you juxtapose it with, well, at least you used to, with really cold sounds. And it's such an interesting, it sets you apart from pretty much really anything out there.
Yeah. I think, Galactic Melt, hold on. I think Galactic Melt, a lot of the drum sounds are from those old machines that we've all heard a million times, and I think it sounds familiar, but it sounds like it's like kind of a different take on it, I suppose. Or it's just I just always try to take those sounds that I really love and like shape them a little differently, like kind of update them a little bit.
Yeah,
I really think they're great sounds. Like they, not only for the nostalgic quality, but I just think there's something about them. They're like perfect samples to me, and like I really like that sound. And sometimes as of as of late, I'm still using drum sounds like that, but I'm trying to make them a little more different because I'm like I've heard it so many times, and I want people to just be like, oh, he's the DMX drum guy, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like but it's hard not to like use those machines and sounds to it's hard to not use them to achieve what I want. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
I completely agree with you because those sounds are perfect samples.
Yeah, I could listen to those and use them all the time, and I wouldn't even care if people hated it, really, because I'm like, but it's like sounds good as long as the beat is different.
Right.
I mean,
right? If you
I think part of what you do too is in the program. I mean, that's when you hear a track that you write, you can usually tell, and it's not because of the sounds all the time, but also because of how you're sequencing and programming everything. You know what I mean? That makes it kind of you.
Love to program. Love to program drums. That's like
I'm the same way. Like I'm a drummer's son, so I grew up kind of listening to drums, tuned into drums in a song, like drums and bass. That's all that's the meat. That's like what drives everything. So I'm always really concentrated on that. But yeah, I'm glad he asked that, because that was one of my questions too. It's just I've always been drawn into the way you get your drums to sound, and also the way you're programming, specifically like the kicks and hi-hats are just so different, and it the poly, like how you're sequencing those is just kind of unlike anyone else. And I've always kind of wanted to ask how you're doing that, because it's just so different.
These weird patterns in my head. I bought some real hi-hats that I've been recording too for newer stuff. I think out of all the sounds on these vintage machines, I think the hi-hats I could easily become the most quickly fatigued on that sound. And I've always loved the kick and the snare in these old machines. I don't know, they're just crunchy and fat. But the hi-hats, can be a hit or miss, and I've always loved real cymbals, and so I'm kind of building a small repertoire of drums to record and some mics, So I think I can get different just my own sound, and I think the hi-hats can really you can really do a lot of stuff with them, and I think it's fun. I really enjoy recording that kind of stuff these days.
Nice, that's cool.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the next track. So it's AirCal. Let's listen to this and we'll talk about it. Another absolutely stellar song, Air Kyle. How did that one come about? It's a little livelier.
I think, in the context of the story about the android astronaut, this is kind of when he's launching into space. So, this is kind of his takeoff moment. But for me, there's a few songs on this record that are kind of air travel or just traveling, centric, or at least have the themes of that. I was terrified of flying. Like, I remember being in the airport, having to fly to Europe once when I, way back, and I was on the phone with my mom, like, I'm not going. I can't do it. I was like freaking out, so a lot of this was about my fear of flying too. And, I've since gotten over it a million times. I love flying now, but I used to be deathly afraid. Like I've missed shows before because I was so afraid of flying. And this is, Air Cal's one of the, that's in that track definitely. But yeah, I mean, it's really about, him blasting off into space. Com Truise, the android astronaut, that's his, like, when he's got, Cathode Girls is basically the build up where he's falling in love with this, an alien girl, and this is his, he's got to leave, and this is his takeoff song. He's like going out to the new frontier, and it's all bright and optimistic, and that's kind of what that is.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, and it's got like this. I'm not going to call it nervous energy, but like that, like
strings in the background.
Yeah, like
I think it's kind of nervous to me. Yeah, it's got the excitement, I think, is there.
I was going to ask you about if there were specific synths that you use for, or ones you feel are work better for, like the effects you're using in the sweeps and transitions, because it sounds like they're not just static samples you're using over and over. They sound like they all have different character to them.
I mean, some are samples from like wacky stuff that I've refused to give away. And obviously treated with all kinds of, wacky plugins. And then, I always love my reverse cymbals and things like that, as, that's a kind of an easy way to do it. But for some reason, I really like that sound, and, it's just detuning them and things like that. But yeah, I never really, I feel like I used a lot on this record, and then I kind of stopped. Like, I would almost forget about it on other stuff. And then I'm trying to, I finally got like the studio organized, so I got the modular set up all, I'm just going to like make crazy stuff, to like
nice
use. But yeah, that was something that I definitely focused on a little more on this record. And I feel like I've since haven't, and I'm trying to get back to that, because I do like those transition sounds and the sweeps and the effects, and they really do add character. I think you can make the song interesting by using those, and then, like, instead of cramming tons of different synth sounds on there, like, everybody's layering, layer, you gotta layer, but a lot of this record is not layered sounds.
No, it sounds really open. I mean, the mixes are dynamic, and it sounds open, you know what I mean? But at the same time, those transitions help blend. I mean, it helps just bring everything together and kind of leads you along, you know what I mean? There's no like, there's choppiness purposefully, but there's no like weird break-offs or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think since this record, I've tried to layer more, and I think I've gotten away from using the sound effects. So I'm like, well, there's no room for it. You know what I mean? Like, we're already, like, it's already crazy to me. And every time a song comes out, like even the Small Black remix came out, just today, and just listening to that, I was like, well, I could have dialed it back a little bit and made it a little more varied. But I'm like actively trying to listen and then look back and be like, okay, so, what can I, because there's always things you can take away from a song, that would give it, more room, and I think that's weirdly as dense and limited as Reason was back then, at least in my mind. I felt limited in it, using it. But I think those limits helped me. As limited as it was, I think it gave me this crazy, like, I just hit this mark in there, and I just it just worked, I think Reason has a lot more headroom now, and I think I've always tried to, when I really updated and I tried to go back and use it, I was like, wow, everything sounds different, even though I'm doing like the exact same thing. Like the program sound, the sound engine must, is just so updated and so, it's really bolstered now. And I just could never achieve that same kind of open denseness, as the way I guess I could put it. It's very interesting. I think a lot of this, the music and like, Aircal is definitely one of those songs where there's all this space in there and there's really not that many sounds. Like if you listen to the drum sounds, there's only a few, and there's a couple synths and there's a bunch of effects and like the weird vocal kind of chopped up sample. That's really, there's not that much going on, but listening to it now, I'm like, wow, it really sounds dense to me, but open at the same time. It's like everything's got its little place, but like I had like 4 different pads playing the same, you know what I mean? And it's just
yeah,
it is abrasive. I think a lot of this music, it's like, Madonna talks about her, breakout record, how she was like, oh, I thought it was too sharp and abrasive. And I think for me, this was, everything's kind of crunchy and it is abrasive. But a lot of people always say it's like chill. But I do, for me, it's kind of dark and stormy at times. And it's, but it's still got that little bit of prettiness in there.
I think people lack maybe some of the verbiage to fully describe what's going on, because it's down tempo, certainly.
Definitely.
It's also menacing at the same time, without being like heavy metal or that sort of thing. It's a cinematic menacing. If you're watching Aliens, they're not shredding guitars. There's orchestral cues, or there's a synthesizer, whatever it is, to build this tension and anxiety in the mix. And your music does sort of the same thing, but also down tempo, but also sort of like hip hop drumish kind of thing. This mix of everything.
I've always been a hip hop fan too. Early 90s hip hop is I love those old samples and those old drum sounds and samplers. And you just gave me a great idea to rescore Aliens, and just instead of using orchestral stuff and the I think they used the 6-track on that is like one of the main synths, a lot of those sounds, but it's just to do it with like a gnarly 80s guitar, like just all the stuff. Like that would be hilarious.
Yeah, that'd be
Bill Paxton freaking out with like.
All right, guys. So let's move on to the next song, Flightwave. All right. So how does this song go into the story of After Aircal?
This is kind of in flight, getting your having your cocktail and your peanuts. Yeah, this is more of the kind of I think this is the brighter side of it, being like, I'm doing it, I'm up here, everything's okay, like like we haven't crashed yet, we're gonna make it. This is kind of the really optimistic part of the record. I think a lot of this record and this track, I really like synth brass, but I always thought that, like when you get a synth and you find the brass parts, the brass presets, they're kind of corny. They're like, really, horny sounding, which, I like they just kind of have this, like they could have dialed it back a little bit, kind of smooth it out. And I think I really love that sound, but when it's kind of like, like I don't like the kind of frog, the ribbit that's in front of a lot of them. I kind of wanted to take that away because I really like that smoothness, and I went crazy. All of this record is like synth brass to me. Is I really like that, and I think this track showcases that pretty good. And I'm trying to think what I used. It's definitely got those frequency modulated voices again. The computer samples of the.
Is that your voice in there? Because I hear an.
It's yes, that is me though. Yeah, I forgot.
I did that.
When people are like, well, "There's no vocals,"
Here's a vocal.
Yeah, but I've always liked that kind of those type of vocals. I've always wanted to work with someone and get a bunch of recordings of that kind of stuff to put in there, because I think that can really change a song by putting that just kind of little, you know what I mean, in there, like.
Yeah,
see what it can do for a song. And yeah, I dabbled. I don't even remember what microphone I used or anything. That was so long ago.
It sounds cool.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I had talked before about that, how kind of a vocal in the form of a synth per
Yes.
se can sound totally different and bring out a totally different character than the synth can. You know what I mean?
I've always,
Yeah.
you know, talking about the next record with Ghostly, they're like, well, we should really try vocals. And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with that, you know, but I've always thought of, you know, especially in songs like this and even like Chemical Legs or something where it's like the vocal for me is never going to be the main thing. I don't want it to be. That's not how I want to tell the story. But it's nice to use it as, like you say, like it's more of an instrument, and you know what I mean, instead of just like, you know, the kind of the main, you know,
Pop vocal, yeah.
the driving of the story. I don't really want it to tell the story. I just want it to be like part of the bigger picture of the story. You know what I mean? I really, that's something that I want to get into too, is, you know, kind of like recording my voice doing that, and you know, kind of running it through granular samples, you know, synthesis, and use that as more of a kind of thing in future music. So I'm actively trying to do that. And then, you know, my girlfriend, she can sing pretty good, so I might try to use that as
Hey, there you go. You get some ahs, some backgrounds.
you know,
Perfect.
That's awesome. What else do you have to say about Flightwave?
Yep, still kind of hitting home about that fear of flying, you know, kind of a big thing for me. And you know, I think this, sometimes I would listen to the song while flying, you know, and just kind of, I try to sync up the AirCal and Flightwave, you know, around takeoff. And when you finally hear the ding, you know, like, oh, you can move around a little bit, you know, to stop clenching the armrests. You know,
Clenching everything else.
Yeah. It's definitely, you know, but for the story, I suppose it's probably kind of in flight, you know, doing your, you know, the android was doing his space tasks and you know, making sure the ship was all right before, you know, the inevitable darkness.
That is
Can I pretend he looks like Wally? Is that okay? I just, for some reason. Okay, cool.
There's a tree I pass by on my walk when I walk the dog every day. It's like the knots in the tree look just like Wally. It's the weirdest thing ever.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, cool. Let's move on to Hyperlips. One of the first things I notice in the background is that tape noise
Yes.
in the background. And it's sort of like you get this sense that maybe something is about to happen.
Yes. I used to sprinkle in the hiss in the vinyl sounds, and sometimes that would come naturally with that old Akai reel-to-reel machine. That was a really noisy machine. I think Hyperlips, is kind of when the android astronaut starts to realize this isn't really what it was made out to be. My journey is going to be much, much more difficult. I guess thinking back, I think this is like a weird advertising thing, just like having to go to meetings constantly and just having to listen to people talk and talk and talk and talk. And I just was like, can I just go do my work? Like I just, all these meetings and people talking and talking and talking. And I think, I prefer silence, you know what I mean? Like it's interesting to like be in a relationship with a person, and you don't always constantly have to talk. You can like be in silence together, but and then not feel weird, you know what I mean? So I think this is kind of my dig at like, we talk too much, or I think for me too, it was a way to like say something about vocals and music, and being that, a lot of music, it would fall flat without the vocals. It really, how would you tell the story? With this song sounds like the song, but without the vocals, what do you talk? What is it saying? What is it doing? And I think this was kind of me trying to, it's kind of like a dig, I guess. At like, I didn't want to do vocals. I was kind of anti-vocal, kind of as far as like, full on, kind of, full on vocals in a song. And yeah.
Right on. Yeah, it's interesting you put all, because I can see all of these things like as you're talking about the songs. I mean, I really do, listening and having listened to the album so many times, like I really do, I do sense what you're trying to convey through these songs, and it's interesting how I think successful, I guess, really is what I'm trying to say, that with the story you're trying to convey these different moods, and how well it ties into your concepts of each one of these songs.
Yeah, I don't know. I really, I don't know. I came up with this funny story, and I don't know. It just really worked. It's strange. It's very strange.
It's cool to hear though, like your perspective personally, because like I like hearing about, the Android and how each song relates, but then also talking about like sitting in a room listening to talking heads go on. You can hear that like in the art pat, like you know what I mean? It's like a movie almost, so that is cool to hear that side of it, because you can really picture that and it makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny too, because a lot of what's out there about this music is kind of always just been kind of loosely, tied to the story, not so much like what they actually really mean to me. And that's funny because I didn't know what they meant until recently. I finally feel like I've had time to digest that period of my life, and I was like, okay, so this is really what I was feeling then, and this is what I was thinking then, and you know what I mean? I've always thought that I don't directly write about events like that happen in my life, in the immediate, right now, or just recently. It definitely works its way in your life is going to be in your music. It's inevitable, but I think it takes me a long time to figure out how I put my life into it, sometimes,
Yeah, that's interesting.
I wait a while, and then I'm like, oh, that's what I was thinking. You know what I mean? Like I really, I guess I was always thinking in the future and wasn't trying to think behind, but now I'm realizing what I was thinking then, you know what I mean? I'm finally able to understand it.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that kind of thing, especially when I was younger, having a harder time maybe being connected to myself. And I think just as you get older, you slow down a bit, and I think a lot of young angst goes away, hopefully, and
Definitely.
you get connected to that to that part of your life. And I definitely can relate to, like, working on projects and being, well, this is a story and it's about this and it's not personal. But when you look back at it, it's such an absurd thing to say, because it is you in that moment with those surroundings directly influencing your every action and how you make music or write a book or whatever it is. You can't help but leak into it.
Exactly.
Even on a subconscious level, it's tremendously influential. So I think it's really interesting that, there's the conscious thing that you're talking about here with the story, and then hearing the juxtaposition of the personal. This is how my life was, where I was at.
Yeah, it's almost in a weird way, like, even though I came up with this, fictional concept, it was like still based on reality in a weird way. You know what I mean? It's just a different take on what was happening to me in that time, in a way that I felt like I would be more comfortable explaining it to people than actually saying, this is what this is about, really. And I think, just being able to sit with yourself after, Jesus was like 10 years ago. So, I'm 36 now. So that's quite, I think I was quite a different person at 26, so, it's interesting to hear the 26-year-old me, 25, 26, whatever, year old me writing music, or how I was dealing with things in my life at that time, in a weird way. Cause you're right that, like, in that moment I was like forcibly fighting off allowing myself to put my personal life in it, but no matter what I did, it was still worked its way in there. It's crazy how it just does.
And I think that's interesting, because the best science fiction is always really a metaphor for something, a real life thing, or horror, right?
Yep.
Star Trek talking, those early episodes talking about racial equality, things like that, but you couldn't necessarily directly talk about it. So this is a way to express those things when you can't necessarily direct it head on.
Yeah.
But personally, for you.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's like putting a skin on something, putting on a costume, I suppose, getting in the Mickey Mouse suit.
Right on. So are we ready to move on?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to listen to Brokendate.
The beach is a good place to pick up girls because you can really see what you're getting. Most beaches are with chicks, and they're
Oh man, this song. It's so, it's iconic really at this point. It's
crazy.
It's a great song, and I think it's one of those things that's going to define a big part of your career. Let's talk about Brokendate and how that came together.
Yeah, this is kind of, I guess, in the story of the narrative is basically when things start to kind of fall apart for the android astronaut. I think this is when he's feeling forced to kind of adhere to a society that he doesn't agree with, and this is his kind of I guess his angst is really at the boiling point for kind of just being able to deal with that and having to deal with that and really not having a choice. He's a robot basically, so he's realizing that he's programmed, and he's kind of, I guess, becoming sort of self-aware and just really not being happy about it. I'd say personally this is probably loosely based on a relationship I had for a long time. I dated a girl for a long time when I was writing this in New Jersey, and this is probably just one of those worked its way in there things about probably an argument or some sort of turmoil in the relationship.
Right.
It's I've never wanted to write like a love song or a breakup song, but I guess this is as close as I could get. This and a couple newer songs that are more kind of about that stuff. But yeah, I'd say this is one of those ones that is based on something like that. It's when you listen to it, it's a very strange way for me to kind of explain my love life problems, I suppose. It sound like the usual emotional song, but I think it's an emotional one for me. In the more negative kind of sounding way, or the sad, the kind of.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's strange at all. I think if you look at the synth, it's almost like a yearning or a forlorning, almost like a cry in reality, and then like the bass, I don't know, it's arpeggiated or how you program that out. It like gives a sense of like tension behind the song.
Definitely. That was one of those one-off sample things, recording that, and dropping it in there and arpeggiating it. And yeah, it's funny how I did that stuff. It wasn't, it's very off the cuff kind of stuff.
But yeah, this is like one of my all-time favorite tracks.
Of ever.
So, I mean, this is one that I come back to constantly. I don't know why. I mean, it's one of those songs for me where like the individual parts are good, but together they're special. There's just something about the way the lead works with the bass, with the, you know, with your chords and everything. It's the drum pattern, all of it's just one of those tracks I always look back to. I'm like, how can I come close to this? So yeah, I mean, I don't, it sounds like you're one of those guys that just kind of, you let it freely happen. You're not really, you have a theme in mind, but you're not too constricted, and it just kind of flows. That's pretty much how these were written, right?
Yeah, I think, I think that was just being naive, you know, because like I said, I wrote drum and bass music, and then like ambient music, and then like kind of the electro, and then lo-fi kind of hip hoppy stuff, and then this was the culmination of like all that stuff, and then being like, oh, but I really love, you know, 80s drum machines, and I think, you know, listening to this song, I think, you know, one of my favorite parts is the hi-hats. They're just really weird sounding.
They're so good. The pattern is so great. It really is.
Yeah, they sound like a stick in like a 5-gallon pail or something. Like really sharp. I don't know. It's interesting how I think these sound now, and you know that, you know, it's crazy too, the resurgence. I'm just looking on Spotify at the songs right now. It's got like 5 million, almost 6 million plays, and like a lot of that is, you know, obviously it's been out for 10 years or whatever, but Doja Cat had did like a little like rap thingy over the top of it a long time.
Oh, sweet.
And then it was never supposed to come out. Like, I don't really even remember what happened or how it happened, but and then it became, somehow it got leaked, and lately it's, I don't know, I had the link saved, but it's got like 70,000 uses on TikTok, that version, and so all the kids are going crazy trying to find this track, and like, you know, it's like, it's really weird to see how kids are reacting to it, because it's like all over TikTok, people doing these crazy, because I'm just not a big TikTok fan, but yeah, my stepdaughter is a big TikToker, and it's just, you know, I know I just don't get the kids' humor these days.
Yeah.
The stuff they find funny on there is like mind blowing. I'm like, I don't even. Well, then why is this funny?
How is this even?
It's crazy to see how that really took off, and I can definitely see a huge bump in the streams of this song because of that. So it's like it kind of weirdly gave it a new breath of air. Not that I think this, you know, record is ever forgotten, because I think it does come from a time period where like this stuff was like, you know, I'm not like tooting my own horn, but I mean, this was like a huge shift for this style of music, and I think it inspired a lot of people, and like if that's what I gave to the world, you know, just aside from the music, you know, just that inspiration for people to write stuff like this, you know, it's like it's amazing. And you know, I like when I listen to this stuff still, it's I think it's crazy, you know. I'm like, how did I do this? You know, I really do think that. I'm like, I can remember what, you know, the songs were about, you know, in my mind, and definitely I think that helps in correlation. Having that narrative helps me remember a little bit more about what they were about, as far as the technicalities of things, and the, you know, things like that, and the technical aspect of the song. Sometimes I forget, you know, what I actually used, or, you know, because I really didn't have that much equipment at that time, and I had a very, very simple setup. I think I was using like a one in like, you know, little M audio interface, and these crappy little M audio, you know. But honestly, every monitors I've had since then, I'm like, I miss those stupid little monitors. I feel like for some reason, like the music, like if I had, you know, if I didn't hear it the way I heard it in that corner in my bedroom, I had one of those corner desks with the thing, you know, it wasn't even like it was not proper whatsoever for writing music, but there was some sort of magic in that corner. I didn't even have a couch when I lived there. I was just like, you know, I would play, you know, the original Xbox, like sitting on the floor or like using like a outdoor folding chair, and like I'd just write music in the other room on that desk. And like, yeah, I was not concerned with furniture. I was trying to buy every piece of music equipment I could get my hands on.
Right.
You know? But yeah, this is one of those, I think, tracks that when we listened to it, you know, back after writing it, I was like, you know, when it was done, I was like, wow, this is a crazy song. You know, and it's got that sample in the beginning about the guy talking about how to pick up girls on the beach, which comes from an old vinyl record, about picking up chicks. Just that was perfect for that song. It's like, yeah.
It's I really love the fact that it's been rediscovered, because I think for me it's so special. Obviously for everyone here that it's very special, and it deserves to, I think, be rediscovered. And you're right. I can only really think of two other guys that were kind of doing similar stuff around the same time. I think of like Makeup and Vanity Sets 88, and Pilot Priest's original motion picture soundtrack. Or you got like the three of you were the only ones in that kind of vibe, if you will.
Yeah, and it's crazy because the synth wave and all that stuff has really kind of morphed into something else. I mean, like, I know Mitch Murder was like around back then, and like people are just considering that synth wave, and then like I'm synth wave too, but like I think our sounds are completely different. You know what I mean? There's this like there's like this, there's synthwave to me, and then there's like this other synthwave to everyone else, and it's very interesting. So I've kind of like, whenever I do interviews now with just whoever, and they're just kind of like, I explain, what is your music? I'm like, well, it's down tempo electronic music, because it's like I don't think I fit in a category anymore. It's like I don't really know how to explain it. It's like its own thing.
Yeah, What I've noticed
fit.
about you guys that have done it from the outset is that it's just really usually people that have like, I want to do my own thing and do what I want to hear, and then because they're all very similar age-ish ranges, you like 80s sci-fi, you like John Carpenter or whoever, it just, that is what it was. There was no coordinated effort between any of the people of that era. It was just happened to be what it was, and then the community and everything else came later. And so I almost think like synthwave now has only recently become a proper genre, because there's sort of agreed terms to what that sounds like now, whereas like you just exist in your own realm. And the same with like, again, Pilot Priest or Mavs or whoever. It's like you guys just do what you do.
Yeah, it's the pioneers who we're like the guys sitting in the temple, smoking opium. I don't know, you know what I mean? It's like, it's like all the it's crazy, the hype about it now. Like I just get tons of ads for synthwave merch and like shoes, and it's crazy, like where it came from in my mind to where it is now. I think I think when I first started this project, I was a huge Neon Indian fan. Alan's a good friend of mine, and I remember just hearing him use those machines, and I was like, I want to do that, but I want to make it a little more sci-fi and like a little darker and a little brighter. You know what I mean? And that was a huge inspiration for me, the whole chill wave thing. And then, I really got put into that box for a while, and then I just never really felt like I fit. And then, and then synthwave, I've always called my stuff synthwave. I think if you listen to go back and look on my uploads on SoundCloud and see like what I tagged in there, like I always called it synthwave, and I honestly don't remember that term being used all that much back when I first started. So, I think that was a way for me to kind of, classify it, even though, there's new wave and wave this and wave that, it's like, it didn't really make sense. There's a million subgenres of subgenres.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess like it's funny for me personally is like whenever I want to introduce someone to what synthwave is, I'll use you as one of the examples, but I'm like, but he's not really synthwave. This just gives you the vibe of what other people are trying to achieve, essentially.
Yeah. I planted a very weird seed, I think, and it definitely, the plant grew into something you didn't expect. I was trying to grow carrots, and and then watermelons came out, I don't know, what I mean? It's very different, and I do think I fit somewhere in there, or it's like when you look at the chronological order of just the whole where synthwave is now, you definitely could see the how it started, and then kind of where it is now.
I'm curious to see how you've this music has been out long enough for it to have sort of maybe be forgotten and then rediscovered by another generation of people, and I'm curious how that will influence other people, because now it's just, instead of being like, well, Com Truise is the retro sounding guy, it's Com Truise is the retro music,
Yeah.
And
yes, that's what it feels like. I feel old. I feel old. I feel like I'm
right.
I'm the 80s now. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
in a weird way.
And so I find that really interesting because, like, TikTok, whether like 13-year-olds, I don't know the average age group, but they're discovering Brokendate, and that to me is like so beautiful.
Definitely. Even if they find out about it in that very, very, very roundabout way, if they can come back and they can, it's, I remember being that age and falling in love with music, certain types of music, and being, I definitely found music in interesting ways back then, completely random ways. And
Absolutely.
like, that's you know what I mean? And then it like changed my life. So maybe some 13-year-old hears that track on TikTok and they do the research and they find it, and then they're like, holy crap, like what is, and then they just find this insane body of work from all these artists that they didn't know about before. So I think that is like, that's beautiful to me, like that's how it happened for me. It just wasn't TikTok, the internet was still, it wasn't all the rage, all the apps and the smartphones were still, really, really minimal at that point.
Right.
And when I started, I think now it's just, but it's also crazy now. I think it's very saturated too. So, it's like you do have to weed through a lot, but, there's definitely a lot of good music out there.
Yeah. And to your credit, you bring up a good point. There's a lot of saturation now. I've got a buddy that he basically tracks synthwave, and he said the last time he counted there was 1,600 active synthwave groups.
Crazy.
Which is funny because like I made the joke that for every 10 fans there's 3 artists for those fans, because it's still a relatively small community, but you still stand out. People can't quite crack whatever it is your combination of things are, so it still stands out as something being very unique.
Yeah. Lucky. I'm very, very lucky.
So let's go into the next song and let's talk about it. So Glawio, is that how you say it?
Yeah, I believe so. It's a Welsh word.
That makes sense. You play this in companion to Brokendate live. Are those two tracks linked together for you?
I would say they're the more love, kind of love centric songs. Definitely. I think Brokendate is the the sad emoji talking terms for today's youth, and Glawio is the happy. And I think just listening to that a little bit, right now is like, it sounds sexy to me. And I don't know, I don't mean that in a way, just like it sounds like, I don't know, it's got that feeling for me. It's strange.
It is seductive.
Yeah.
I think the reasoning is just with the drawn out bass and how the drums kick in. It draws you in, and obviously there's a little bit of like grit, a little bit of like dirtiness to it, and I think that is sexy or seductive.
Yeah, I believe that's the Tom drum machine sounds too in that song.
Those sound great. Can I ask you, did you use any internal like Reason stuff, or were you only using like external synths? Were you using like Maelstrom or any of those?
External synths. I did use their effects a lot, like the
Scream.
Yes, Scream and that purple reverb, or blue. It's blue.
Oh yeah, actually that reverb sounds nice.
I love that reverb. That gated verb out of there is like amazing. Actually, it's one of my favorites. And I think.
Did you have it when it? Sorry to interrupt. Did you have it when it had the pulverizer? Were you using that back then, or was that later?
Yeah, later. That came later.
Okay.
Those little Roland, it's kind of little box effects. The filter a lot, and the I'm trying to think of what. I think the built-in delay at the time wasn't the greatest. I'm trying to think of that newer effect that was kind of almost like an eventide harmonizer kind of effect. That I think that came after, but I really like that effect too. When using like putting it on hi-hats to make them sound really wide and kind of wobbly. And,
oh, nice.
Glawio is like, I believe the Matrix 6 is what I used a lot on that. It's definitely got that kind of bit crunch quality to it. I think that was really big, and I think I went pretty heavy on it in the beginning. I think a lot of the stuff on In Decay has that same kind of Glawio bit crunchy sound, and I kind of dialed it back a little bit because it can be kind of, it's rough on the ears. I think if it's too noisy, it can make it really noisy and not as smooth. Somehow I nailed it in this, where it's noisy, but it's still smooth. It kind of disappears as the song kind of builds. And I love playing this one live.
Yeah, I mean, it resonates really, really well live. And what I keep coming back to as I hear you talk about this is just, I want to say the craftsmanship of the songs, of all the things that you either had to do because you were limited, or because it sounds like you were pursuing a certain tone or effect, and the things that you had to do to get that. And I think that's probably what's missing in some other facets of music out there is that real attention to detail and going for something very unique and specific.
Yeah, I mean, like I always explain it, like if you really listen to this music, it's fairly simple in its structure, I suppose, and sometimes the songs are very simple in their composition too, of the sounds, and it's not really. But I think I was driven to do it in a more simple way because of the way I just was working. I think it was impossible for me to kind of overcomplicate it. Like it would, I wouldn't have gotten anything done if I tried to complicate it any more than I already did. Going back and forth between Ableton and Reason was, and I never, you could you could rewire them And I'm not trying to remember if you could rewire them together where you could run, Reason through Ableton and vice versa.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that was available. I think that might have been available, but I never did that. I always thought that was like, well, why not just use Ableton if you're going to do that? You know what I mean? If you're going to wire Reason through into Ableton as its own channels, like, I'm just going to, record these parts in Ableton and export, like, if it was the lead, like, it would be the whole lead part. So it'd be however long in the song, say it's like 12 or 14, I don't know, whatever, a minute long of the lead song. It would be a minute long sample. Like I said, you had to start from the beginning every time because you couldn't just start in the middle of it. It was...
That's like old school, yeah.
Yeah, but I really think that made it sound the way it does. Like, it took forever to finish a song because you constantly had to listen to it from like the middle. You know what I mean? To get like, but I think using the sampler like that, and like I said, I would drop in just like single bass notes, and then write the bass melody in Reason that way. Like, I would make the just a wide open, no filter, and then I would use the filters in Reason. Like, they worked. They clearly, like, this record did all right. It's like anybody who ever said anything about Reason is, I'm like, well, I did it. Like,
yeah, well, that's the thing. There's always people. Well, you can't do this and that. I mean, you always prove those people wrong. You know what I mean? There are really no rules, really. You know what I mean?
I always try to tell people that now too. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what you use, as long as you're like, you're taking your time and you're developing it into something that's like yours, and you know what I mean. Like, it's
exactly.
Like, it doesn't matter what you use. It's really wide open landscape.
It's awesome. All right, are we ready to get into the next song, Ether Drift? All right. I really love this song. So where does this fall in the journey? We're getting towards the end of the album, obviously.
This, Ether Drift definitely, I would say that this is kind of, coming to the realization for the android that he is screwed, that he can't have what he wants and he has to live a certain way. And he's not going to be able to fall in love with or be with the woman that he wants to love, and that that's really what part of the narrative story we're at. I think for me, I think this was more of a cinematic kind of a song where I was just kind of, it definitely sounds very emotional to me. I can't really piece together what I was thinking on that song, other than this kind of, I don't know, that has to be something I wrote in the summer and then just being hot and I remember my tiny porch and things like that. But it's a crazy little song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the stabs and just how it builds, and I would say that that's a pretty consistent thing with your music and especially on this album is how everything kind of builds in these mood shifts, and it kind of gives you the impression of movement and be it emotional or an actual event happening.
Yeah. I think a lot of this music sounds the way it does too. I mean, I would detune everything -50 centitones, everything, all the, so it took me a long time to tune just to get it right. And I think it's detuned to the point where it almost doesn't work, but it weirdly does. And I think it all sounds it sounds really wide and big, but it's actually they're very simple sounds. And I think that's a lot of just detuning everything. And I forgot to mention that Glawio, it means to rain. That's what that word means.
Oh, good.
Nice.
So that's another kind of, that's what that is about. Ether Drift is kind of the, I guess, drifting, just, kind of realizing you have to, we really don't have control, I suppose. And you're kind of dealing with it.
Right on.
Yeah, I think my big takeaway from this record whenever I listened to it years ago or even now is I think you're good at not giving it all away right away. You don't give the meat of the song away right away. Do you know what I mean? You save that sweet spot for a little bit. You'll throw some stuff out there and it takes you on a journey. You don't know where you are. And then when it comes together, it's all flowing. And that, I like that. It's not just, here's the greatest part of the tune, here's the chorus right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like teasing with this stuff. Definitely. I think, I really like intros and outros, and sometimes I like them to be from different songs on top of each other back. You know what I mean? I really like that.
Yeah.
Kind of, you can be abrupt with it, but still, and have it, kind of be soft at the same time. You can still be kind of sharp and you stick something in there, and it's people weren't expecting it, and then it's it's I was trying to think what I was going to say about the song, but Yeah, the drum pattern is really wacky. Like I think
It
when the
is.
drums come in, it's like you're like, oh, this is not what I thought. It kind of sounds like
Yeah.
this kind of ambient, kind of beautiful, pretty song, and then it's just this wacky drum pattern comes in, and then it like it's really hyper, and then kind of mellows out, and then
It's awesome. Are we ready to go into the final song of the record, Futureworld? This is like, again, it's one of those things. It's so clean. The high ends are high, and the lows are lows, and everything just cuts through the mix really, really well. And it's kind of a weird, funky song, I guess.
Yeah. Futureworld is kind of like, I think for me, it's about the, in the story, at least in the narrative, it's about kind of, this android astronaut and the evil overlord are kind of having a battle. And this is about him realizing he's going to have to do it on his own. And, the pressures that he was facing to escape with this alien woman that he loves, that he fell in love with. And this is kind of the battle sequence. And it's that they're, not necessarily going to win this battle, that they have to escape this, kind of tyranny that they're dealing with. And this song was heavily inspired by Tron, the original Tron.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. I must have been watching it a lot at that time, but yeah, this is one of my favorite tracks. It's a slammer. It's really
This is
heavy. It's like if there was one track on the record that's heavy metal, it's like that. This Futureworld is the banger. The rides and it's just like.
And I love how the beat's straight too, but that bass line is so just like all those, like, it's just very. It's like pickup notes almost. You know what I mean? It sounds so fluid.
That's another of the, like, dropping the sample in the sampler and then playing it like real crazy way, and the way that, like, the sample plays when you put it in a sampler. It's not, it's as you go higher in octaves and things like that, it gets like shorter, and it doesn't it's not spread the same way, and it's like I couldn't achieve a bass sound like that by just like firing up a mini Moog or something and playing it. Like, it wouldn't have the same kind of stabbiness, and that's always been a thing with my music, and definitely, like, even from 2011 to now, it's like, if it's a stabby bass like this, it's most likely done with a computer and virtual instruments or samples on the computer using a computer sampler. Unless it's like a long pad style, kind of droning bass, then I'll use a real synth. I think, the sound might start from a real synth now, but it's always put into a sampler because I like that I can control how sharp it is much more doing it that way than like just sending MIDI, trying to play it from especially one of these old ones. They don't like it. They don't like that fast information coming, all the time. And then they get jumbled up. So yeah, that's the technique I really use for a lot of the bass on this record. Was, the real stabby stuff was loading a sample in and playing it and kind of writing it out that way to get that real sharp effect. And I still enjoy doing that.
Yeah, wow. I mean, again, like, I've just, because having used Reason and then just knowing everything that goes into what you're doing for these tracks, again, I'm just so impressed and, like, gobsmacked at the what you do to create these sounds. And
yeah, I loved that it's the NNXT sampler.
The NNXT,
yes, there you go.
That
thing
one.
You can do some really interesting stuff with your sounds you dropped in there. And I
think it's cool you do that too, because that is, like, I come from a hip hop background. Like, I used to use an MPC 3000 when I was a kid. My dad had a 60, and, like, you had no sample time, and you had to kind of do the best with what you had, and in doing that, it pushed you to do kind of stuff you wouldn't normally do. But that's cool that you do that, because I've never really thought of doing that. Like, and that actually would create a different sound. It makes you do different things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think I think a lot. That's why this record sounds the way it does, because it is mostly sampled like that. Like, it's sample sounds I made and then put into a sampler. I made them specifically to put in there, like, just like you do a quick click on something, like a really quick sharp note hit, and then just trail the reverb out and use that as the lead. You know what I mean? Like, it was doing things like that because you didn't really, I didn't know what I was doing really.
Yeah,
I mean? Like,
that's awesome.
I was still trying to figure out the sound. And then, all the drums, though, all the drums for most of this early music, I'm trying to think, until we're all programmed in Reason with the redrum. I'd have like 10 redrums. I'd have one redrum just for the hi-hats, or just one redrum for the open hat, just to, like, shape it a different way. Yeah. We're at the samplers, and that was, and I think the drums still have that throwback quality to their respective machines, because I didn't put them in the sampler and I didn't really change them all that much, just enough where they sounded different but new. They weren't, I didn't really change them too much. It's like, it's interesting. I didn't put those in a sampler, but I put, everything else, like, the drum sampler. But the drum sampler, like, on the channel, you really didn't have that many options to change it. You still had velocity, the filters, and volume and things like that, but you weren't really really shaping the sound or sculpting it in any way. You'd have to use effects after the fact, outside of that internal chain that the redrum has. And I never used drum loops or anything like that. Like maybe some hi-hat stuff or like weird percussion stuff, but it was mostly just all drawn out programmed hits,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You ever crash your computer? Because you're saying you've got like 10 redrums open at once doing stuff? Like, that's got to be taxing on your computer.
It used to get clunky there a bit, but not too bad, which is interesting because when you put, like, say, you drop the lead part of a song in and then it's got to play out for the rest, you know what I mean? Like that, sometimes that is really taxing. And I think I worked with a pretty high buffer rate to compensate for that. But yeah, now I run into that a lot more now that I don't use Reason as much because Ableton, there's all the plugins are different and it's just like, I can run into stuff. It crashes all the time. It's constantly crashing.
Reason's cool now because I got it recently and the newest one, and you can just open it as a plugin, like in Ableton. Yeah, I love that. That's great.
When I was getting into K2 ready to go, I had to go in and open up like all these old tracks, and like there was missing sounds, and I had to go through like so many hard drives to find like weird sounds that I had put into samples, so I could, I was just kind of sprucing up the tracks, and I was just like going through and looking how at the period when Reason shifted where you could drop audio right in there on the timeline, and like, you could see how I went from using the samplers to like really trying to do the audio in there because you could play it from the middle or wherever you wanted to start. Didn't matter, start from the beginning. And I was like, I added some things to some older tracks and some different things just to kind of finish them. So it was nice to just be able to keep that Reason sound that, that I really loved. But I could just drop the audio in instead of having to make a new sampler and like, and then I could mix the sound in much easier than before. Before I'd have to, how you can flip it around and rewire everything.
Oh yeah.
I'd have to do that because it would never wire the right way.
That's right. Yeah.
Chain. Yeah.
It's part of the fun of Reason.
But now, finishing up those songs for MDK2, it was nice to just go in there and drop audio in, but still have that same, quality of those original songs. Like they sounded like they did when I made them. You know what I mean? Like they didn't lose that.
That's awesome.
Part,
So, we've closed out the album. What closing thoughts or final thoughts do you have for Galactic Melt?
Well, it's the 10-year anniversary this year. And I think Ghostly's doing something very special. So I'm very excited about that. Another thing to note that the title track of the record finally came out. It was you could only get it through digital download from the vinyl when the record came out. And then the digital bonus track was Korova.
Which I love that song.
Yeah.
And then Galactic Melt, the actual song, is definitely one of my favorites. And a lot of people don't realize that there was a title track. I tried to be weird with stuff, back then, and wanted to be make it kind of, it's hard to get or whatever, like just
right.
not the format. So, but I really think this record has shaped me, and I've been held to this, everything since this has been held to this kind of what this record did, and it's been interesting to see, and people have been pretty open about stuff, and but I do actively listen to it and try to get back to that kind of simpler sound, to try to it's just, I think it sounds better, to kind of loosen things up, and it's I feel like I got really dense for a while,
So like you were experimenting, you were figuring stuff out and just seeing what happened and the joy of discovery of what you were doing. So it seems like a brighter time, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
Ben, what do you got for Seth while we've got him?
I just, thank you for this record, and it was a pleasure to talk to you, and I appreciate you and the music, and I'm glad I discovered it.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. That was
Yeah.
fun to. It was a memory lane. It was a lot. Last year was digging up the old songs from for the Indicate 2, and then this year is the Galactic Melt 10 year. It's crazy to think this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah.
It
It's
still holds up too. So that's,
Well, I think it's just one of those. It's a classic at this point. I think you want to point to electronic music, and beyond. I know that begrudgingly or not, but whatever. It's like it fits in synthwave, but I think it stands apart on its own. If you want to say you want to listen to a really good electronic music album, this is something that you would put on. I think it holds up with Boards of Canada or anybody else, and I think it's so striking on its own that it can't not help but hold up, because it's just so experimental and so pure, and doing interesting things with this record, and obviously you've gone on to do that, so that's not a slight against all your other material. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and again, holy crap, I didn't realize we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary, so thanks, Seth, for your time, and really appreciate you sitting and talking to us about this record. It's really important to myself and Ben, obviously, and Kyle, who couldn't be here. So, until next time, this is Eric.